Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are People 3. We are a diversity, equity, and inclusion firm based in Nashville, Tennessee, but we work with organizations all over the globe, have consultants all over the globe as well. We are honored to have you here with us today. Thank you for taking the time to share, hopefully, your lunch hour with us. And we're really excited about our wonderful panelists, including our host and moderator, Kimberly Stephen Tate. She's been doing this work for decades, has led ERGs in a major tech company, has worked with a variety of different organizations. She is a true champion for this work and a DEI expert consultant. We're really honored to have her working with People 3. And I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce our panelists. I am Dr. Candace Warner. I'm the founder and CEO of People 3. And once again, just want to welcome you all to our panel discussion today. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Palu Reddy. Palu has been doing consulting work in government agencies. Oops, I did not mean to go that fast. I apologize. For years. She received her doctorate from Vanderbilt University. She is active in her community, and she is one of the directors in her board of directors for the Nashville International Center for Empowerment and Coaching Girls and Run Teams. She lives in Tampa. We also have Tony Peterson with us. Tony does consulting around diversity around the globe. He has a TED Talk. If you have not seen Tony's TED Talk before, check it out. What am I learning from my white grandchildren? Truth about race. And Tony also is a program inclusion and equity program success manager and career coach with Merit America, and serves on the board of local nonprofit organizations. We also have Sonal Schneider. Sonal works for Walt Disney World, and she got her bachelor's degree in international relations, international business, and biochemistry. And then she went on to get her master's degree in hospitality and tourism. She is a DEI advocate, and she's passionate about highlighting cultural experiences and their intersectionality. We also have Sherry Rosenberg. She has a long history of spending her career working with a variety of Jewish nonprofits across the country. She had her undergraduate degree from Ohio State University and her master's degree in Jewish communal services and nonprofit management. And she spent a year in Israel volunteering in small towns, immersing herself in Israeli culture. And in her free time, she likes to cheer on the Buckeyes. We have Dilman Yassin. And Dilman she does a lot. She has her bachelor's of science from Tennessee State University, her master's of healthcare in informatics from Lipscomb. She is a performance manager. She also does volunteering with nonprofits such as the Kurdish Professionals, where she has a role as director of community outreach. And she has also helped lead some efforts around the 2020 census campaign. And we have Sabina Mohyuddin. Sabina is a Bangladeshi American Muslim born American, and she graduated from Vanderbilt University. She is the executive director of American Muslim Advisory Council, which empowers the Tennessee Muslim community through civic engagement, community building, and media relations. She also serves on the board of National Organization of Workforce Diversity, which helps promote diversity in the workforce. She was inducted into YWCA's Academy of Women Achievement, and in 2022 received the Trailblazer Award from Metro Council's Minority Caucus. So with that being said, thank you to all of our panelists for being here today. We're going to talk a little bit about world religion and U.S. religion for just a quick moment, and then we're going to dive into a panel discussion. So I want to just ground everyone with projected growth around world religion. So you can just take a quick look at this slide to see what representation in different world religions look like in the world. And then here is religious affiliation in the United States. And here is the representation, the number of people in the US that relate to the different world religions. Great. So now what I wanted to highlight was the different symbols, texts, and holidays that we have across different world religions. So here are some symbols, texts, and holidays that we associate with Christianity. And I'm going to ask Tony. Tony, is there anything, as you look at these symbols, texts, and holidays, anything that stands out to you or anything that you might want to make a mention of?
Yes, a couple things. One is, I think across Christendom, uh, Christianity across the world, I think most strands of Christianity use a form of the cross for as a symbol of Jesus dying on the cross. Some of these other symbols vary from sect to sect or denomination or denomination to denomination. And then regarding the text, I would say most of these pretty much across the board, the Holy Bible is considered a text, but only a denomination which people don't even agree totally is a Christian denomination would be using the Book of Mormon and some other books that come from that perspective. And similarly with the holidays, it actually varies across the world, whether folks celebrate Christmas and Easter, whether they celebrate Ash Wednesday, Lent, and Advent as Ash Wednesday as a day, Lent and Advent as seasons. Some denominations are they design their whole year around those seasons and those holidays, while others are they might focus just on Christmas and Easter. So that's all.
Thank you, Tony. Here are some symbols, texts, and holidays around Buddhism. And I'll open up to the panelists if there's any of these that anyone wants to make a nod to or any comments that you might have on this slide. All right. We have Islam. Here are symbols, texts, and holidays that are associated with the Islamic religion. Again, I'll open it up if anyone wants to make any comments.
Sure. I'll make a comment, and I'll let Dilman maybe talk about the symbols and texts, and I'll mention a little bit about the holidays, because Islamic holidays, the Islamic calendar follows the lunar calendar, and so the dates of our holidays will change by 10 to 11 days each year. Will be 10 to 11 days earlier. So the major holiday that people actually will take off or spend time with their families or readjust their schedules will be Ramadan, where they fast every day for a month. And this year, actually, March 23rd will be the first full day of fasting. So it'll go on for a month. And at the end of Ramadan is Eid al-Fitr, so the celebration, and that's actually April 22nd, the day of April 22nd. And since we do go by the lunar calendar, the holiday actually starts the evening before, so April 21st is the beginning of the holiday. And Muslims, because living in the West, they might just take one day off for that Eid al-Fitr, but if you're from Muslim countries, they have 3-day holidays. So a lot of people do try to take a 3-day holiday. And then Eid al-Adha is the other holiday that to be mindful of, and that comes at the end of the Hajj or the pilgrimage to Mecca. So sometimes people will take that pilgrimage. It's required once in a lifetime if you have the means to do so, but an employee would take 2 weeks off so they can go to Saudi Arabia and make that pilgrimage. But no matter where you live in the world, you celebrate the end of the Hajj with Eid al-Adha. Again, these are lunar holidays, and there's traditional ways of determining the date of the holidays. So some people go by astronomical calendars, so they know years in advance what day. Other people go literally by the sighting of the moon, so they don't know until the night before the holiday that the next day is the holiday.
Thank you for that.
There it is. Sorry. Also with the star and the crescent symbol, the star and crescent it's not an official symbol of Islam. It's very accepted all over the world as a symbol. It's been featured on mosques, decorative arts, flags of some Islamic countries. However, the star and crescent goes it predates the Islamic faith back to the Ottoman Empire. So it's not necessarily a symbol of Islam. It's just kind of been culturally accepted over the years.
Thank you for sharing. Here are some symbols, texts, and holidays from Hinduism. And I'll open it up if anyone has anything that you would like to elaborate on.
Yeah, I would love to talk about the swastika because I know there's recently especially been a lot of chatter and it's come up in the news. The swastika is actually a Sanskrit word, going back to the etymology. It means auspicious or lucky. And in all parts of Asia, it's used by Hindus, Buddhists, Jains. It's a symbol of good luck, and it's how they denote religious temples or places of worship. If you look at Google Maps, for example, where they might show like a cross for a church, the swastika is what's used in that part of the world. Unfortunately, after World War II and the appropriation by the Nazis, it's had a very negative connotation in a lot of countries in the West. There's been movements to try to ban it because it's now associated with white supremacy instead of the religious and cultural context where it came from. So kind of a bit of a PSA, but also I just want people to know that it's not a Nazi symbol. They appropriated it along with so many other things. And there's actually, I was reading up about the history. It used to be a symbol that was common all across the world. There's even signs that it appeared in synagogues way back in the day. So I know there's movements to try to take back the actual cultural meanings of it. But yeah, that's one I definitely wanted to call out.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I'm just going to speak about the holidays. So just like the U.S., where there's different regions, the South, North, Midwest, that we celebrate holidays, Hinduism is celebrated in different countries. In India itself, I was looking up on Google today, there are 22 languages recognized in the Constitution and 126 languages and dialects right now in the country. So there's foods, traditions, and clothing that vary by region. And so even the holidays vary. So the holiday Diwali, my family calls Deepavali. And there are a few differences that are that we have from the Diwali holiday. And in every region, they might have a different name for the holiday or different traditions. And I just highlight that to kind of show how large India is and how rich the culture is and how many different customs and traditions vary by region.
Thank you, Palu. And we have Judaism. Here are symbols, texts, and holidays around Judaism. Anyone want to mention anything specific around this?
Sure, I will talk about Judaism. So similar to what I think it was Sabina that's talked about Islam, all of the Jewish holidays we follow a lunar calendar as well. So every year the holidays change. The one thing that is always the same is Shabbat, or our Sabbath. Our Sabbath starts on Friday evening at sundown and ends on Saturday evening at sundown. All of our other holidays, again, like Islam, start the night before the holiday. So if you see it on the calendar, it usually begins the night before, and some people will celebrate it the night before. And I think one of the things to talk about too, a few other people have mentioned that there are so many different types of Jewish people in the country, in the world, and everyone celebrates things differently. There's not one cookie cutter way to celebrate. Someone that's a little bit more observant might not use electricity or check their email on the Sabbath on Friday night and Saturday, or any of the holidays listed. Other people will. So just remember, there's not a cookie cutter way to be Jewish. There's also not a cookie cutter, or not all Jewish people look alike. A lot of people assume that all Jewish people look like me with dark hair and pale skin. That is not the case. There's Jewish people all across the world. There's Jews of color. There's Jews in every country. So I think that's important to remember as well. When it comes to the text, the Torah, we learn and we study the Old Testament, as well as the Talmud and other books as well. But just the Old Testament, we don't really study the New Testament. Maybe our clergy does, but as a congregation, we do not. We also, there are sects different denominations of Judaism. So again, like I was saying, some are more observant, some are less observant. The mezuzah, which is the symbol, the bottom symbol, that's something that goes on the doorstep of Jewish people's houses. There's a prayer in it. It's supposed to be good luck and a sense of security. Some people will touch it and kiss it every time they walk into the room. Other people just like to have it there as a sense of security and safety. So when you see houses with that, that's what it means. And I think that's it. Also, when it comes to the holidays, again, like I was saying, they start the night before, and just to be conscious of that when you're looking at the calendar.
Thank you, Sherry. So one thing to consider, and something you can do to be a great ally to world religion, is instead of like associating a religious holiday to indicate a time of year or season, i.e., oh, what are you doing on Easter break? Consider, happy holidays, season greetings. Instead of using church to mean a place of worship, it could be a place of worship or a house of prayer. And then we wouldn't want to say the Muslims or the Jews, but rather we would want to say the Muslim community or the Jewish community. And also not assuming that everyone happens to identify as Christian. So now we're going to go into some panel discussion, and anyone can answer. I'd love to hear, what are some key religious or cultural customs or holidays that are the most important to you personally? And by the way, many families are blended, so feel free to share how you might celebrate multiple religious practices in your home.
I can start with this question. So we know that the Christmas is coming, the Hanukkah is coming, a lot of other holidays are coming. So a lot of people assume that Hanukkah is every Jewish person's favorite holiday. Some people it might be. It is not personally my favorite holiday. My favorite holiday is Passover, which happens usually in March or April. And we celebrate the exodus of Egypt when we were slaves in Egypt and now we are free. And I would say it's my favorite holiday. It's an 8-day long holiday. People celebrate it in different ways. But I have so many traditions and so many memories of my family celebrating when I was younger, all the way through adulthood. So it's definitely my favorite holiday. And when it comes to families that are blended, my husband is not Jewish. And when we first started dating, I think month one of before we even became officially boyfriend and girlfriend, we talked about what we were going to do on the holidays. Are we going to be okay? I asked him if he was okay with not having a Christmas tree. A lot of blended families do have different ways. There's not one right way to be a blended family, but I did not want a Christmas tree in my house. So that was important to have those conversations. My husband is not so religious in Christianity. Like he's not such a intense, devout, practicing Christian. So I would say we kind of adopted all the Jewish holidays, which I like. I actually think sometimes it's easier to be a blended family of two religions because now he only knows my way of celebrating as opposed to us having to compromise. So I actually really like the fact that my husband is not Jewish. It makes it easier for us.
Thanks, Sherry. Anyone else?
I'll piggyback off of Sherry's. I also have a blended family. My husband was born into a Christian family, so we celebrate the Hindu religious festivals, but we do also do a lot of the Christian things. However, I guess maybe an opposite to yours, Sherry, even though he's not religious and like you said, I make him celebrate my holidays more. We do have a Christmas tree, but I'm pretty sure 50% of the ornaments are like Indians. They're like Indian iconography. There's peacocks and there's, buildings and monuments, but mostly it's things that my children have made. They're just, in my opinion, really fortunate to grow up with all these cultural aspects. And so they don't have to pick one or two. And I love Christmas. I grew up in the United Kingdom, so that's just what I've known. And Diwali is my favorite holiday outside of Christmas. And a lot of things are similar to Christmas. There's lights, so we always put up lights around the house. I love it when it falls around Christmas because then he has no excuse to complain about my Christmas tree coming out in November. Otherwise, he has a hard set rule. It can't come out until Thanksgiving. But the food aspect, it's great. I love combining the cuisines of both cultures, which I think it's important anyway, just to celebrate. But I don't think there's anything wrong with blending the stuff.
I love that.
I'm sorry, Kimberly, do you want to move on?
Go ahead. Absolutely.
Just briefly, as others are talking, I'm realizing that much of what we do in celebrating what we call Christian holidays like Easter and Christmas in particular are really more cultural than they are religious. Now, I'm not at all saying that Christmas can't be a religious holiday. It is my favorite aspect of the holiday is the religious side of it. Same with Easter. But, there's been the controversy about whether you say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays around this time of year. And I've heard both of them all of my life. And Merry Christmas to me is not a religious greeting. It's a cultural Christian, a cultural Christmas greeting. It's not at all. I'm sorry, I'm a little under the weather today, but it's a cultural thing that we've gotten used to, not so much a religious greeting.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for joining us, even though I know you're feeling under the weather. We appreciate you. What are some common misconceptions surrounding your religion?
Chair, I just wanted to, like, after what Tony said about separating culture and religion, I think that's a really important delineation. And I was thinking about an Indian myth of Hindu women are subservient to men. And in India, women do not have, there are places where women don't have equal rights, but that is not because of religion. It is the culture and the people using religion to keep women down. And so the rights of women vary by class and region because of culture, but not religion.
So I like.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, it's exactly the same in Islam. And so when I talk about Islam, it's always first telling people that, what you see in the Muslim world is culturally based, and the religion of Islam is not always in line with what is being practiced in those different cultures. And so, men and women relationships and just these stereotypes of men being domineering, women not having no rights, those are pervasive. And it's always trying to talk to people and help them understand that Islam gives women rights of earning money and getting an education. And so in the US, 73% of Muslim women have a bachelor's or higher degree. And that's something that a lot of people have this misconception because, and for myself, I'm not a very talkative person, kind of quiet. And so people make assumptions that somehow, I'm oppressed, subservient, and on top of that, wear a scarf. So, and the idea of the scarf, that Muslim women who choose to wear it are somehow forced to wear it. And it's an oppressive symbol where I find it the exact opposite. I find it very liberating because I'm claiming who I am for myself. That's how I feel about it.
I think another misconception in Islam is the idea around Jesus, peace be upon him. We believe in Jesus. We believe that he is one of the prophets of God. We don't believe that he is the Son of God, but he is held in very, very high regards all throughout the Quran, our holy book, and he is talked about in so many different verses. And so I think a lot of people have a misconception that we don't believe in Jesus or that we get offended by it. It's the complete opposite, actually. He is one of our prophets, and we also believe that he will return to earth. But that's something that I've heard growing up all the time, that we don't like Jesus, when in fact he is one of our prophets that we highly respect and love.
Thank you very much. What are some biases that you've personally experienced in your life related to your culture or religion? Some biases you've experienced.
I'll take this one. This one relates to food. One of the biggest ones that I've encountered is that all Hindus are vegetarians. And the truth is actually a lot of them actually eat meat. It's only about 30% that do not. And that's just because they, in their religious beliefs, they believe that nonviolence is more important. And so my dad personally, he eats meat. He will not eat beef. That is just his personal choice, because in India, cows, they are not worshipped. They are held sacred in a way, just because it's a very agrarian society. So agriculture is big, and the cow to farmers provides a lot of things. So there's the milk, which is the most obvious one. But in rural parts, even like the cow dung was used as fuel. Once a cow died, the skin was used for leather. So it's one thing that helped them survive. And for that reason, a lot of people don't eat beef, but they will eat other food. The most common is they'll eat chicken, fish, lamb, especially. But as the theme of this talk today, there's no cookie cutter Hindu as well. My mom will not allow meat to be cooked inside our house, so my dad has to do it in the outside kitchen back home, but that doesn't stop him from enjoying meat. He loves Thanksgiving, he loves turkey. So it's just one of the biggest things.
I would say also, as this question and the previous question, I think kind of tie together really well. When it comes to Judaism or Jewish people, I think some people think that there's a ton of Jews in the country, in the world. In one of the first slides, we saw that only 2% of the United States population is made up of Jews, which is really small, but a lot of times people think there's so many of us, which is not the case. Also, when it comes to Jesus, he also is not our savior. We think he's just a guy, he's not our savior. Jewish people did not kill Jesus. Some people think that, but that's not the case. We don't really, in my Jewish day school education, as well as in my synagogue, we don't really talk about him a lot. So it's just not something that's talked about. And then I think also when it comes to biases, I think a lot of people assume that all Jewish people have a really strong connection to Israel and feel a certain kind of way towards Israel, regardless if it's the Israeli government or how the Israelis are treating different people. Some people do. I lived in Israel for a year after college, like it said in my bio. My brother, who also grew up Jewish, has never been to Israel, doesn't really care about Israel. It's across the gamut. I think it's valid to have legitimate criticism of Israel like any other country, but I think that we don't all speak for Israel. We don't all blindly support Israel. Some do, but some Jewish people do, but not every Jewish person.
So I wanted to add, Islam is the most diverse faith group in America and around the world. You see that diversity. What I experience a lot of times is the assumption that people assume that I'm Arab, even though I don't think I look Arab, but I'm Arab and I speak Arabic. And so I think for a lot of Muslims, a lot of people, non-Muslims, they think that all Muslims speak Arabic because our holy book, the Quran, is in Arabic, and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was an Arab. But Arabs only make 18% of the Muslim population worldwide. And the largest Muslim populations are actually in Indonesia, and then India, and then Pakistan and Bangladesh. But Muslims do, they say their prayers in Arabic, they can read the Quran, but most are unlikely to know the Arabic language.
I think another thing about Islam that I've experienced kind of indirectly is that Islam is a very brutal or violent religion. People perceive the terrorist groups or the jihadists as kind of the best representation of Islam, when in reality, they are far from that. If anything, that's nothing of what Islam is. And so people kind of having that misconception because of what they see on the news and their lack of willingness to educate themselves on what Islam is has come up, especially after 9/11. Kind of growing up in America and having my parents have Arabic names, not because they want to, but because I'm Kurdish and we're a minority in Iraq and Iran, Syria, and Turkey. And so all four of those countries don't allow Kurdish names to be given at a certain point in time. They didn't allow Kurdish names to be given. And so my parents, myself, have also been assumed to be Arabic because of the names that we have, the names that my parents and grandparents have. And so kind of going back to the violence aspect, people assume that because we have Arabic names, we also speak Arabic because we're Muslim and that we have a violent religion. When in reality, that's not the case at all. Islam is a very peaceful religion.
These are all great examples. Thank you so much. I'd love to hear how you've had to navigate religious differences in the workplace.
I'm happy to start with that question and not really answer it because much of my work experience has been in Christian spaces. In fact, most of my work experience has been in Christian spaces. And so there are, the Christian part of it is assumed. But in the past 5 years, I've been outside of, I've not been exclusively in Christian spaces. And so I've become hyper aware of just trying to find out what are the ways that we can be more inclusive religiously in the workplace. And I know that some of the issues, and okay, I'm not going to do this because other people can speak about it better than I can. But I just want to say from a Christian standpoint in the US, and as a professional Christian for most of my work life, this is a new question for me about how to navigate, but it's a really important question to me.
I'll tackle that, Tony. I went to a religiously affiliated college. It was in Tennessee, of all places, and it was technically the oldest Presbyterian college in the nation, actually. But the majority of churches near it were Baptist. And I was sharing this story earlier. They were very welcoming, in true Christian traditions. They invited all the students over for fellowship, dinners, and for college students, they will go at any opportunity to get a great home-cooked meal. And it wasn't until when I would go attend church, because the way I was raised, you went and you respected God. It didn't matter whether it was a temple, synagogue, or anything. You go and you celebrate, you worship, you thank. And I remember one day, and it really stood out to me. It wasn't the lead pastor, but one of the laymen. They were giving the sermon, and they basically said, and excuse my language right now, if you were not Baptist, you would be going to hell. And being raised in a very open religious environment, as a child, I also went to Catholic school. This was the first time I'd heard something like that, and it really, really upset me. I had to have a conversation with the actual pastor afterwards, because I had to remind him that was a very uncomfortable conversation for me to hear, because it made me feel like I wasn't wanted, that even though I was respecting our differences, to have to hear something like that, as you heard Dilma and Sabina mention, Jesus is recognized in other faiths, even in Hinduism and parts of India. They claim that he actually visited in a pilgrimage of sorts. But just like every religion and every person can't be a cookie cutter copy, there's different sects of Christianity as well. There's Presbyterians, there's Baptists, there's Catholics, and they each have different ways of sharing, I guess, their religious affinity. So I just think it's important to remember not to alienate someone or make them feel uncomfortable, and instead use it as an opportunity to learn and maybe celebrate the differences and similarities, because we all have those.
I'll add to that too, because I've had something similar happen to me and members of my family. And I'll say that it puts you in this uncomfortable space of having to comfort the person as well, and being very mindful about what you want to say in the workplace, because you don't want to make people uncomfortable when you are not part of the dominant religion, and you want to be very careful that you're not putting yourself or your job in jeopardy.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think like sometimes this can be really complex because even, and I think Sherry alluded to this earlier, even inside of each religion, you tend to have even different pockets, right? Like she mentioned that this one particular Baptist church said, you know, hey, you're going to go to hell if you're not Baptist. But that doesn't mean that all Baptists believe that, right? I mean, there's different subsections of being Baptist or different subsections of being Catholic. And so I think one key thing for me is just never making assumptions and always sort of like seeking to understand what someone's actual belief is and not just assuming that they believe something because it has a certain title or label on it. Sabina, what were you going to say?
Yeah, and going back to like what Tony was saying, that are, you know, usually workspaces are you know, majority Christian and have understanding around holidays and such forth from a Christian perspective. And so when you're a minority, and as a Muslim, like I pray 5 times a day, or I go to Friday services in the afternoon, you know, asking for that space or having to leave a meeting because you need to go pray becomes kind of a difficult conversation. And in one sense, you don't want to make it in a big deal. You want to just be able to do what you need to do. But at the same time, it would be nice if people understood, and when they made those programming. So, I mean, even last Friday, there was an advocacy training I really wanted to go to. It was Friday at 12 o'clock. I'm like, but I go to the 1 o'clock Friday service, like I can be there before 2, like, and I ended up not going to it. And, you know, it was progressive space and everything, but they were just kind of totally clueless of that because normally they don't have Muslims attending their events. So, you know, it's, you know, sometimes as a minority, you're called on to explain your religion all the time and educate. And for me, with my work, yeah, I'm all for it. I can do it. But that's not for everyone. And so there needs to be just more kind of general education and awareness. So it's not on the shoulders of that one minority religious faith.
I think it's such a good point. You know, a lot of times corporations will celebrate, and through like employee resource groups or what have you, they'll try to celebrate different world religions and, you know, make a nod to it, share information about it, but then they forget to actually look at schedules and, you know, having town halls on, you know, different holidays that they shouldn't have them on, or not being thoughtful about the multiple times a day that you might need to pray, or when it's in fasting season, you know, not scheduling meetings or having big office parties with lots of food. So I think there's definitely a lot of ways companies can be more sensitive to their employees to make sure they are being more inclusive. And so speaking of that, I'd love to hear, you know, have you ever had an experience where you worked at an organization that wasn't as aware or wasn't as sensitive to religious or cultural differences? If there's a specific example you can give where maybe the environment wasn't as inclusive, I'd love to hear what that's looked like for you in the past.
I can start. I think for me, when you notice that you're the only brown person or the only immigrant or the only person of color in an organization, it's really frustrating because it makes you think, you know, am I here just to fill a checkbox, or am I here because my work is truly valued? You know, when you look at organizations, top tier of who they are, and it's nobody that looks like you, and then the next tier, nobody looks like you. Even, I mean, anywhere in the organization, you don't find anyone that looks like you. It's frustrating because then you think, should I stay here and, you know, be part of that diversity and maybe bring in more people that look like me? Or should I leave and find somewhere else that has people that look like me? It shouldn't be my job to recruit other people from my communities. That should be part of HR. That should be part of, you know, the company structure. So that alone has been frustrating in the past for me, because it always puts me in a spot of, again, do I stay and contribute to the diversity and help them grow it? Or do I just leave and find somewhere else that maybe will appreciate me and my background a little bit more.
Similar to what Tony said in the last question, was the fact that most of my, or almost all of my professional experience has been in Jewish spaces. So when I was reading this question, it kind of brought me back to college when I went to Ohio State University, which, although there are about 10 to 12% Jewish students, it is the biggest school in the country, or was the biggest school in the country when I went there. So there was obviously a lot of, there was a lot of diversity there. So there wasn't a ton of knowledge about Judaism. So I remember I was in a class my senior year, and we were supposed to have a group project on Yom Kippur. We were supposed to do a group project on Yom Kippur, which is our holiest day of the year, our Day of Atonement, which is where a lot of people fast, they don't eat, they don't drink, they stay in synagogue all day, they repent for their sins from the previous year. So it's very, very important. And I remember telling my group, like, I can't meet that day, I can meet any other day. And they just like didn't understand. They were like, but why not? Like, it's not a big deal. It's, can you go to services after? And I was like, well, no. And I had to explain it multiple times. And I think that's really hard. And I finally was like, if this was on Christmas, what would you do? They're like, we would never do it. I go, well, this is like my Christmas. And maybe they understood that then. Again, they were younger, so hopefully now they're a lot more accepting. But I think that's really important to remember. And then I think also is realizing that people celebrate different ways. Like, I think a lot of times at university, a lot of people ask me, well, what do Jews think about this? I don't like to speak for all the Jews. I like to speak for myself, Sherry Rosenberg. I would say if you asked me a question and another Jewish person a question about how we celebrate or how we observe, it would probably be very different. And that's great. And that's what makes the world a great place. But just remember that all of us on the panel, or any of us, do not speak for every one of our religions or our cultures. I think that's something important. And then also one more thing really quickly, I think also when it comes to mourning the dead, that's something to bring up. My father passed away my senior year of college, and Jewish people have an intense 7-day mourning period called Shiva after someone dies. And I remember I emailed my professors the Sunday morning my dad passed away and sent them a link, a Wikipedia link to what Shiva is, that mourning period. And there's lots of different ways to observe it. And the teachers were like amazed by it. And like, they asked me lots of questions. And I think it's important to remember when it comes to mourning the death, a lot of people mourn it differently as well. And some teachers were accepting the fact I was going to be out of school for a week. And then other teachers were like, why a week? So I think to remember that as well.
All right. When have you or your colleagues experienced a lack of religious inclusion, and what happened?
I think it'll be the same across all of us here. It's going to a party or a meeting and not being able to eat something. So for Muslims, you can't eat pork, and then depending on your level of understanding of the religion, some will eat meat from a restaurant or from a store, and others will require that it has to be halal meat from a halal restaurant, from a halal butcher. So always having some kind of vegetarian choice, but making that a good vegetarian choice, not a salad, and say, hey, I covered my bases. Being intentional, or asking, not, you don't have to ask that one person. You just put out a mass email. Say, does anyone have any dietary restrictions? That goes a long, long way.
I'll add another specific example. Some of you may know henna is a very traditional way of adornment for the hands and feet in India, but also across the Middle East. And I know it's an artistically popular now here in the States. But I remember when I got married, we actually were in India. And so I had the henna on my hands and my feet. And I came back to work, and I was told I would not be allowed to be in a guest-facing role until the henna was gone. Anyone who's ever had henna put on knows it doesn't disappear overnight or within a few hours. It can take up to a couple of days or weeks. But in the interim, I was told to just wash my hands continuously. I was kind of kept in a backstage role, which affected the job that I had at the time. And instead of it being something that I could be happy and proud of, like, hey, this is in celebration of me getting married, which is a major life change for me, it ended up being, wow, like this is something I need to hide and be embarrassed about instead. It was a very, very negative experience. I'm 100% sure HR did not handle it the way they should have. Ultimately, it led to me leaving that company because they didn't even bother trying to ask what it meant. It was just, oh, you went and drew on your hands over the weekend or over the past week. We can't have someone see that and associate us with this.
Thank you for sharing.
Kimberly, there's a question in the Q&A, and I know Sabina's answering, but I think it ties into what Sonal just said. The question is it sad? It is sad to hear of your experience with employers that have not accommodated your religious and cultural needs. Do you think that more sensitivity training will work in this climate? And so I want to take a stab at that. Briefly, yes, but it's not all. And so listening to Sonal's experience, I mean, that is a lot of ignorance. I'm sorry if that word's offensive, but there's a lot of ignorance there. And excuse me. And in the workplace, there has to be a commitment to overcome that ignorance. So when we say sensitivity training, I mean just education. And part of that education is developing empathy, developing curiosity about one another, humility. I'm quoting something I once wrote. I didn't mean to do that, but it's having an attitude of acceptance, and then also having an attitude of learning, and then using that in things like policies. So that's my answer. I don't mean to be the answer.
Any other thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, you know, I think I wouldn't call it sensitivity training. I like cultural competency training, and looking at it in a sense of this really furthers the mission and the climate of your of your organization, creates a positive workforce environment for your employees. So you know, think of it that way, because sometimes when we say sensitivity, I've seen that, you know, different trainings, people are like, well, why are we giving Muslims a special privilege or something like that? And it goes into a lot of biases, but so just, you know, frame is how you frame it, and how you allow for questions to be asked, and you know, where's the discussion going, and how are you uplifting everyone through better understanding. It is not trying to you know, give special privilege or to one group or another, but to create a better work environment for everyone.
Thanks, Sabina. There's a question in the chat that I want to have the panel address. So Al said, this has been very insightful, excellent representation. Why has there been a significant increase in anti-Semitism in the past year, and what can we do as a group or individually to address the challenge?
So I can start if you want. I can start with that. So Al, thank you so much for bringing that up. Obviously, if you've been reading the news or seeing what's happening in the news, there has been a extreme rise in anti-Semitism. More than, I saw a statistic a few months ago that said more than 60% of all hate crimes committed in the United States target Jewish people, while we're about 2% of the population. And I think that's really telling. And I think even in the last month or so, it's probably gone up even more. I actually am not, was going to say, I don't know why there has been a significant increase. I think that some people are saying it's okay. We obviously all saw what was happening with Kanye West, regardless how you feel, if it was anti-Semitic or not. I think that a lot of people are just thinking that it's more okay to say and more okay to do. I think some people think it's okay to say because there are so many Jewish people, or the Jewish stereotypes of we control everything, we control Hollywood, or it's okay to say because it's not that big of a deal, or we're not Nazis, so it's not really anti-Semitic. There has been a really big increase on college campuses as well. And I think going back to what I said previous is I think a lot of people assume that all Jewish people are connected to Israel, are passionate to Israel, think that we blindly support Israel. And so people feel like that what Israel is doing is a direct representation of me as a Jewish person in Nashville, Tennessee, and that's not the case. So I think that could be one of the reasons. I think more and more people are just thinking it's okay to say out loud, and hate across the board. Racism is higher, homophobia is higher, Islamophobia is higher. I could go on, and I bet everyone is agreeing that with that as well. So I think people are just saying it's okay to hate more. I think as a group to address this challenge, I think just talking about it, I think supporting people, if you know someone that's Jewish in the workplace or one of your friends, checking in on them when you see this rise of anti-Semitism, I think also just like, I think just talking about it and making sure you're checking in on your friends, and also just like having those conversations are hard to have. I know in the summer of 2020, a lot of people were talking about racism, and those conversations were really hard to have. These conversations are hard to have, but so necessary for us to learn and grow.
Thank you for that so much. We also have a comment around like what would cultural competency training be implemented? Like, why wouldn't we put cultural competency training in the workplace, considering the fact we have so many diverse cultures, ethnicities, religious backgrounds, and so forth? And what I will say is that one of the problems that I've seen doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work for years is that at the corporate, in corporate America, a lot of times at the executive leadership teams, you tend to have very homogenous executive leadership teams that are made up of predominantly white men, and they just don't know what they don't know. And a lot of times they don't necessarily take an ear to hear about what's happening with their employees. And so I think it's creating great intention. And so one of the things I think everyone can do is be an ally. And in your workplace, go back to your employer and say, like, why don't we have cultural competency training? What more could we be doing to provide allyship, to be more respectful of our fellow colleagues? And so I'm going to move. I know we've got about 5 minutes left. What other ways do you think that organizations can ensure their environments are more inclusive that we haven't talked about so far? Any other suggestions?
Well, I think you have to look back in the policy of your company to make sure those are inclusive. So like a simple example is for Muslim women who do wear a hijab or a scarf, and we wish your policy about uniform. That shouldn't be any kind of problem, but oftentimes companies don't have a policy, and it will just depend on the manager who's in charge on whether that's an issue or not. And one person will say, yeah, no problem. And then another one will say, well, I don't see anything written in the books, you can't do this, and really throw the book at the person. So let's go back to see what your policies, and if they're inclusive, religiously inclusive, and think of the things we talked about, being able to have someone to report to if there is an issue for an employee in terms of discrimination, and so that they feel comfortable in reporting it, and there's some kind of process to handle it respectfully. And so and you talked about DEI programs, and 2020, a lot of companies were just kind of on board. I have a DEI officer, but and we saw there was a lot of tokenization, at that point. So what power do they really have to implement positive changes? So, you've got to really see what's your intention. Are you just, doing it, to look good, or are you really trying to create an environment for everyone who comes? Because, ultimately it's good for your employees, it's good for the culture in your company. It's something we should do. Just think of your policies.
I'll add to that with the policies. It refers to taking time off for celebrating religious or cultural holidays, whether it's done through, flexing existing schedules or maybe like a floating holiday.
Mhm.
If we look at the calendar, just about every business is closed on Christmas, as Dilman mentioned. For people who don't celebrate the holiday, yeah, it's great to have a day off because you can be with your family, but then when do they get that similar consideration when it's something that they celebrate? I'll talk about Hinduism specifically. I know in New York, they finally passed a law that Diwali is going to be an officially holiday next year. And just from friends that I have up there, I know that all the Jewish holidays are luckily treated in a much better way than the rest of the country. But why is it's only in certain places? It's not true that there's only Hindus or Jews in New York. They're all across the country, all across the world. I'm going to go back to India. There's so many federal holidays in India, and they recognize every religion. There's days off for Eid. There's days off for Hanukkah or Yom Kippur. Actually, not Hanukkah. Yom Kippur is actually a day off in India. There's also Christmas, and then there's the regional holidays. But it doesn't come at the expense of the work environment. People actually feel happier because they don't have to miss out on spending time with their families because someone else, the CEO of the company, doesn't feel the same way. So I think holidays and time off is another thing to be mindful of.
I think also just ask, right? Have those conversations. I think asking also not just say, oh, we're going to give you Hanukkah off when you're allowed to work on Hanukkah, right? I would rather have Yom Kippur off than Hanukkah off. Have those conversations, ask people what they want, ask your company, have these hard conversations. And also remember when you are having the conversations that everyone is different and realizing that words matter. So the way you ask the question or the way the people in HR or higher ups ask these questions, words do matter, and those have a lasting effect on all of us.
Well, I know we are right at top of the hour. We could probably continue this conversation for another 2 hours and share, but I just want to thank every single panelist today. Thank you, People 3. This has been a great conversation, and just thank you for your time today.